Good evening and welcome to Scotland at 7. My name is Ben Francis, and as per usual, we'll start off the show with an update on the Ukraine war on day 1065 of its conflict. On Wednesday, a Russian UN envoy gave a guarded response to Trump's demand for Vladimir Putin to make a deal and end the war in Ukraine. Quote, "It's not merely the question of ending the war, it's first and foremost the question of addressing the root causes of the Ukrainian crisis," said Dmitry Polyansky, Russia's deputy ambassador to the United Nations. Quote, "So we have to see what does the deal mean in President Trump's understanding. Trump threatened Russia with taxes, tariffs, and sanctions if a deal to end the war in Ukraine is not struck soon." Tatiana Stanovia, the founder of the political analysis firm R-Politik, said that despite Trump's efforts to force Putin to negotiate, the Russian leader appeared convinced that he had the resources to outlast Ukraine. Quote, "A peace deal on Russian terms would save significant resources, but absent such an agreement, Putin is prepared to fight as long as it takes." Russia's current economic situation was unlikely to compel Putin to negotiate with Ukraine. Russia claimed on Wednesday it had taken control of the village of the Panday in Ukraine's northeastern Kharkiv region. The Kharkiv region is under constant shelling, and 2 men were killed 1 day earlier in the village of Goptivka, according to the Ukrainian governor of the region. The Ukrainian Air Force said on Wednesday that air defenses had shot down 65 Russian drones in 10 regions, including in Kharkiv. The claimed Russian advance came as its troops closed in on Pokrovsk in the Donetsk region. The General Staff of the Ukrainian Armed Forces said the Russians continued to concentrate their main effort on Pokrovsk. The financier turned activist Bill Browder is making a push for all 300 billion euros of frozen Russian assets to be spent on military funding to Ukraine. Speaking on the sidelines of the World Economic Forum in Davos, Browder warned that if U.S. military support for Ukraine dried up and alternative funding was not found, Russian territorial gains would force millions of Ukrainians to flee, creating, quote, "a refugee problem like we've never seen before." The Yantar, a Russian spy ship, was tracked closely by the Royal Navy this week after it entered UK waters on Monday and passed through the channel at a time of heightening concern about the safety of undersea cables. A French official told the news agency France Presse that French military resources had also been mobilized to monitor the ship, but the Russian ship, quote, "had no proven hostile intent." Residents of Russia's Kursk region have made coordinated social media posts appealing for help to find relatives after the Ukrainian border offensive launched last August. Russian media reports on Wednesday, people in the Russian region have for months accused authorities of not doing enough to secure their loved ones and keeping them in the dark about the scale of fighting. Ukraine says thousands of its own civilians are being held in areas seized by Moscow since its assault began in February 2022, and that it is providing safe passage for Russians in the Kursk region. A Russian military court on Wednesday upheld a life sentence for Alexander Permakov, convicted of seriously injuring the pro-Kremlin writer Zakhar Pripelin by blowing up his car in 2023. Permakov, who has both Russian and Ukrainian citizenship, told the court that Ukraine's SBU service, a security service, had promised him 20,000 euros for killing Pripelin. Permakov's defense team at the appeal hearing said he had given investigators information on hidden weapons and told them the location of an unexploded device. And now moving on to the Middle East update. At least 47,000 Palestinians have been killed and over 111,000 wounded in Gaza since the October 7th attacks, according to the Gaza Health Authority. The United Nations Secretary General Antonio Guterres called on Israel's security forces to exercise, quote, "maximum restraint" after a major Israeli military operation in the West Bank city of Jenin. The United Nations chief, quote, remains deeply concerned about the violence and urges security forces to exercise maximum restraint and use lethal force only when it's strictly unavoidable to protect life, a spokesperson for the UN General Secretary said. At least 8 Palestinians were killed and 35 people were injured in the Israeli operation in Jenin, according to the Palestinian Health Ministry. 3 nurses and 2 doctors were also injured by Israeli fire during the military operation, which took place as the Gaza ceasefire entered a 3rd day. The director of Khalil Suleiman Hospital in Jenin said. Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said the Jenin operation was, quote, another step towards achieving the goal we set. Strengthening security in Judea and Samaria. He said it included police, military, and the Shin Bet International Intelligence Agency. Jenin has been a focus of Israeli raids into the occupied West Bank throughout the 15-month war in Gaza. The Palestinian Health Ministry says more than 800 people have been killed in Israeli raids since October 2023. Hamas said 4 more female Israeli hostages will be freed this weekend in return for Palestinian prisoners. The next group of hostages due to be released is expected to include captured female Israeli soldiers who will be exchanged for Palestinian prisoners serving more lengthy sentences who are being held in Israeli jails, some of whom will be deported to third world countries. Not third world countries. The new US President Donald Trump said he was not confident that the ceasefire deal he personally insisted on would hold. Quote, it's not our war, it's not their war, Trump said during the signing of a group of executive orders after his inauguration on Monday. Quote, but I'm not confident, but I think they're very weakened on the other side. Trump also reinstated an executive order allowing him to impose economic sanctions against the International Criminal Court, ICC, among the blizzard of executive orders made on Monday evening. Trump is expected an order issued during his presidency that used emergency powers to create a sanctions regime targeting the court, paving the way for the US to hit the judicial body and its staff with draconian sanctions. Trump's pick for UN ambassador, New York Congresswoman Elsie Stefanik, expressed support for Israeli claims of biblical rights to the entire West Bank. Stefanik's comments, made during a 10th confirmation hearing exchange, show how her stance might affect US diplomatic efforts during the ongoing conflict in the Middle East, particularly regarding Palestinian self-determination and territorial disputes. The United Kingdom's Prime Minister Keir Starmer held a call with his Israeli counterpart Benjamin Netanyahu. Number 10 said Starmer told Netanyahu that the peace process in the Middle East should pave the way for a, quote, viable and sovereign Palestinian state. An Israeli readout of the call said Starmer faced pressure from Netanyahu over frozen arms sales to Israel. And now moving on to our next story, a Scottish story. The Scottish Government statement on National Care Service. Social Care Minister Marie Todd has outlined the next steps for social care reform to Parliament, following plans to progress the National Care Service Bill being paused in November 2024. The bill has been scaled back due to opposition from the other Scottish parties, with Scottish Labour's deputy leader calling the bill a, quote, waste of money, and the Green Party's health spokesperson calling it, quote, not fit for purpose. The government's revised plans for the proposed National Care Service include the introduction of a dedicated advisory board, support for unpaid carers, and enshrining care home residents' rights to see loved ones. The advisory board, comprising of people with lived experience of accessing care, social care workers, care providers, trade unions, the National Health Service, and local government, will be established to provide guidance and aim to drive improvement within the care sector. Rights of residents in care homes to be visited by family or friends will also remain in the legislation to reform social care, alongside a right to breaks for unpaid carers. The Scottish Government bill will also improve information sharing across health settings and the ability for individuals to access and manage information about their care. Commenting on the reform bill, Marie Todd said, quote, "Change is ultimately needed to reform the social care sector in Scotland, but it has to be meaningful and sustainable change. That's why we paused the bill for further consideration to fully capture the views expressed by all stakeholders, members of Parliament, and the public." And moving to our next story, our first British story of the night, Sainsbury's to axe 3,000 jobs. Sainsbury's has announced today that it will cut 3,000 jobs through its closure of hot food counters and cafes nationwide, as well as by cutting senior management jobs by 20%. The supermarket will close the remaining hot food and pizza counters, as well as all 61 remaining Sainsbury's branded cafes, subject to consultation. The announcement follows warnings from Sainsbury's that Labour's increases in the national insurance tax would force it to cut jobs and raise prices over the next year. With Simon Roberts, the chief executive of the supermarket group which owns Sainsbury's, claiming he was making these job cuts due to the company facing a, quote, particularly challenging cost environment. Opposition parties in Parliament have blamed Labour's budget for the staff cuts, with the SNP's business spokesperson Chris Law commenting that, quote, "The Labour government is taking the economy in the wrong direction," arguing that life is getting worse, not better, for many families and small businesses around the country. The Prime Minister's official spokesperson responded to suggestions that layoffs at the supermarket were influenced by Labour's budget by arguing, quote, "Only by growing the economy we can fund our public services and raise living standards," inferring that the budget was necessary for economic growth, so sacrifices had to be made. Now moving on to another British story, Chancellor Rachel Reeves to soften non-dom tax rules. Rachel Reeves has said that she will relax the tax rules on non-doms that were proposed in Labour's October budget. A non-dom is a wealthy individual who lives in the UK but pays taxes in another country. Labour had previously announced that they would scrap the non-dom status and give current non-doms 3 years to move their assets to the UK before they had to start paying normal UK tax rates. The Chancellor made the comments to an audience while at Davos, a multi-day conference hosted by the World Economic Forum and attended by the world's most powerful political and economic elites. In her speech, the Chancellor said, quote, "We have been listening to the concerns that have been raised by the non-dom community. However, Downing Street referred to the change only as a, quote, tweak that would not impact the overall revenue from the tax rise." And Conservative Shadow Chancellor Mel Stride responded to the move by claiming, quote, "At the election, Labour said their plans would raise money. Now they have been forced to admit the plans make the UK less attractive," referring to the number of millionaires leaving the UK having increased by 157% in 2024. On the other hand, the SNP's economy spokesperson David Dugan criticised the government, commenting, quote, "The Chancellor's Davos deal for millionaires shows just how rapidly out of touch the UK Labour government has already become." And now moving on to another UK story. The EU trade chief says it could consider the UK joining pan-European customs deal. The European Union's new trade chief has said the EU could consider including the United Kingdom in a pan-European trade agreement, but emphasised that, quote, "the ball is now in the UK's court." While the UK Labour government has ruled out returning to the single market and customs union after Brexit, the possibility of joining a continent-wide deal could open the door to closer cooperation with the European Union and bolster much-needed economic growth. Maros Sefcovic, who led post-Brexit negotiations for the EU, said that allowing the UK to join the Pan-Euro-Mediterranean Convention, PEM, was, quote, "something we could consider." The PEM is an agreement that was originally agreed in 2012 and allows goods to flow tariff-free across borders. Members include the EU as well as some North African countries, Switzerland, Norway, Georgia, and Ukraine. Some businesses have supported the UK joining PEM, saying it could help their complex supply chains, cut red tape, and improve trade. UK Government Minister Matt Pennycook has rejected the economic olive branch and said, quote, "We're not seeking to participate in it at the present time." The Scottish National Party responded by saying the Labour government's dismissal of pan-European customs agreement is an act of, quote, gross irresponsibility. William Bain, head of trade at the British Chamber of Commerce, said the Chamber, quote, would support a move to rejoin the PEM convention as our research indicates it would have majority support among UK businesses who trade in the European region. Commenting, the SNP Foreign Affairs spokesperson, Stephen Gethens MP, said, quote, the damage done by Brexit is clear from all the economic data, including the Treasurer's own analysis, and with Trump tariffs looming, closer ties with Europe are a no-brainer. Europe has offered a small economic olive branch and the Labour government has slapped it away within a few hours. Rather than the hard Tory Brexit embraced by Labour, the SNP are consistent and clear that we urgently need to rejoin the EU customs union and single market. Now, moving on to another UK story. UK competition watchdog investigates Apple and Google mobile platforms. The UK Competition and Markets Authority, CMA, has launched investigations into the impact of Apple and Google's mobile platforms on consumers and businesses, days after the government faced criticism for installing a former tech executive as the organization's new chair. The CMA will investigate the tech firm's mobile operating systems, app stores, and browsers to determine whether both companies require tailor-made guidelines to regulate their behaviors. The move follows the government denying it was, quote, in the pocket of big tech after appointing Doug Gur, a former country manager of Amazon UK, to chair the CMA. The CMA said it would look at the impact of Google and Apple's mobile platforms on consumers and businesses, including app developers. The CMA said virtually all smartphones sold in the United Kingdom were pre-installed with Apple's iOS or Google's Android operating systems, while their respective app stores and browsers had privileged positions on their platforms compared with third-party products and services. The CMA will determine whether Apple and Google should be designated as having, quote, strategic market status under a new regulatory regime brought in by the Digital Markets, Competition and Consumers Act 2024. If they are deemed to have that status, the watchdog can impose, quote, conduct requiremements or force change, such as making it easier to download apps outside Apple and Google's own app stores. Sarah Cardle, the CMA's chief executive, said both companies' mobile platforms were consumer gateways, quote, into the digital world. The CMA said it would complete its investigation by the 22nd of October. Last week, it opened its first investigation under the new legislation into Google and the impact of the company's search and advertising practices on consumers, news publishers, businesses, and rival search engines. And moving on to our next story, on Ireland. The Irish Parliament elects Michael Martin as Prime Minister. The Irish Parliament has elected Michael Martin as Prime Minister 24 hours after chaotic scenes in the Dáil caused the cancellation of his formal appointment. Martin's return to the role of Prime Minister comes after a group of regional independent TDs, members of Parliament, who are propping up his government, agreed a compromise to delay talks to resolve the dispute that derailed what should have been a set-piece ceremony on Wednesday. With Cam replacing the previous day's record on opposition benches, Martin pledged to, quote, remain open to constructive ideas as leader of the centre-right coalition government. He said, quote, as I look at Ireland today, it is clear that there can be a degree of cynicism towards politics, and too often we dismiss the motives of others, especially those we disagree with. I reject this. I believe in the good faith of those who have served their community in effective office, and I believe that politics remains a force for good, a force for positive change. Parliamentarians voted 95 to 76 to support the nomination of Fianna Fáil leader as Prime Minister. High on the agenda for the new government is the chronic housing crisis that has dominated local politics for the past few years, along with health, education, infrastructure and the economy. The new cabinet will be confirmed later on Thursday, but few surprises are expected in the coalition, which is made up from Martin's centre-right Fine Gael party and the Fine Gael led by outgoing Prime Minister Simon Harris. On to our next story. ICC chief prosecutor seeks arrest warrant for Taliban leaders over persecution of women. The International Criminal Court, or ICC's, chief prosecutor, Karim Khan, has announced today that he was seeking the arrest warrant against senior Taliban leaders in Afghanistan over the persecution of women, a crime against humanity. Mr. Khan said there were reasonable grounds to suspect that Taliban Supreme Leader Habibullah Abu terrible pronunciation, and Chief Justice Abdul Hakim Haqqani bear criminal responsibility for crimes against humanity and persecution of genders. Mr. Khan said the Afghan women and girls, as well as the LGBTQ community, were facing, quote, an unprecedented, unconscionable, and ongoing persecution by the Taliban. He added, our action signaled that the status of women and girls in Afghanistan is not acceptable. ICC judges will now consider Khan's application before deciding whether to issue an arrest warrant, a process that could take weeks or even months. The court, based in The Hague, was set up to rule on the world's worst crimes, such as war crimes, crimes against humanity. It has no police force on its own and relies on its 125 member states to carry out its arrest warrants, with mixed results. In theory, this means that anyone subject to an ICC arrest warrant cannot travel to a member state for fear of being detained. Karim Khan said that he would soon be seeking additional applications for other Taliban officials and noted that other crimes against humanity were being conducted as well as persecution. Human Rights Watch said that the prosecutor's actions should put the Taliban's exclusion of women and girls from public life back on the international community agenda. And now on to a Scottish story. The Scottish Government announces actions to address failures following deaths in prison custody. Justice Secretary Angela Constance has pledged immediate action will be taken to address systematic failures in relation to death in prison custody. In a statement to Parliament, Ms Constance said that the Scottish Government accepts Sheriff Collins' fatal accident inquiry, finding that the deaths of Katie Allen and William Lindsay were preventable and that systemic failures contribute to their deaths. To contribute to the system-wide reform that must take place, 6 direct actions will be taken. There will be a new independent national oversight mechanism which will strengthen accountability in relation to the implementation of FAI recommendations. This will also ensure that systemic issues are identified and addressed. In addition, His Majesty's Inspector of Prisons for Scotland will provide independent oversight and monitoring of the implementation of the report's recommendations, reporting directly to the Justice Secretary. The actions are: the Scottish Prison Service will urgently and immediately review its policy on items that can be used as ligatures, while continuing to develop an anti-ligature risk assessment to support existing work to ensure prison spaces are as safe as possible. In addition, the development of suicide prevention technology will accelerate and, if viable, be piloted and reviewed. Talk to Me, the Scottish Prison Service's suicide prevention strategy, will be completely revised and overhauled. A standardized approach will also be developed to ensure that all information from relevant agencies is shared with the Scottish Prison Service at the time of a person's admission to prison. Death in prison, learning, and adult reviews will now be independently chaired and already include consideration of the safety of prisoners' physical environment, which was a specific recommendation in Sheriff Collins' determination. Also, legal aid for bereaved families participating in deaths in custody fatal accident inquiries will become free, with means testing removed through legislation that will be brought forward at the earliest opportunity. and an additional independent review of the fatal accident inquiry system will be established to look at the efficiency, effectiveness, and trauma-informed nature of investigations into deaths in prison custody, to report direct to the Cabinet Secretary report by the end of this year. Also, the Scottish Government will continue to pursue the lifting of Scottish Prison Services corporate Crown immunity under health and safety law with the UK Government. Ms Constance accepted the Sheriff's 25 recommendations and promised that each and every one would be given careful consideration with a full formal response delivered to Parliament. On to our next story. The Scottish Government announces new police investigations and review commissioner. The Scottish Government Justice Secretary has appointed Laura Patton as the next Police Investigations and Review Commissioner. Currently, His Majesty's Chief Inspector of Prosecution in Scotland, Ms Patton, will take up her role as Commissioner on the 1st of April 2025 for a 5-year period. The Police Investigations and Review Commissioner, the PIRC, aims to increase public confidence in policing through the independent investigations into serious incidents involving all policing bodies operating in Scotland, and the way they respond to public complaints, as well as promoting continuous improvement. Ms Patton will succeed the current Commissioner, Michael McLeod, CBE, who retires on the 14th of February 2025 after almost 6 years in the role. An acting Commissioner will be appointed for the short period between the two appointments. Cabinet Secretary for Justice and Home Affairs, Angela Constance, said, quote, the PIRC plays a vital role in safeguarding the trust the public have in their police service. Quote, I am sure the extensive knowledge and experience of the justice system that Laura Patton brings to the role will build on the excellent work undertaken by Michael McLeod, CBE. I look forward to working with Ms Patton as she drives the organisation forward and ensures it delivers the new responsibilities contained within the recently posted Police Ethics, Conduct and Scrutiny Scotland Bill. I would also like to commend Ms McLeod for her dedicated service and wish her well for the future. Now on to our next story. First Minister makes statement following Met Office red weather warning for Storm Irwin. First Minister John Sweeney made a statement to Parliament today following the Met Office issuing a red weather warning for damaging winds forecast as Storm Irwin, produced by Éowyn, is set to hit Scotland. The red warnings for wind, pronounced Éowyn, the red warnings for wind have been issued for central and southwestern areas of Scotland as well as Northern Ireland on Friday. These are accompanied by wider amber and yellow warnings for wind as well as yellow warnings for rain and snow. Met Office Chief Meteorologist Paul Gutterson said, quote, we reserve the issue of red warnings for the most severe weather, which represents a likely danger to life and severe disruption, and that is the case with the storm. The Met Office said people should expect flying debris resulting in danger to life, large waves and beach materials thrown onto coastal roads, seafronts and homes, very dangerous driving conditions with fallen trees and roads, power cuts affecting other services such as mobile phone coverage, damage to buildings and homes with roofs blown off and power lines brought down, roads, bridges and railway lines closed with delays and cancellations to bus, train, ferry services and flights. The First Minister said that the red weather warning would be in place from 10 a.m. until 5 p.m. on Friday, with winds up to 100 miles per hour. Police Scotland have issued a do not travel notice, and councils in affected areas have announced school closures. Transportation routes and travel services are expected to be affected for a prolonged period, and while for individual local authorities to decide, a majority of schools are expected to be closed. NHS boards are standing up local businesses' contingency agreements. This will include communications with patients and staff. Some NHS and social care services are expected to be disrupted. SGORR met this afternoon to assess measures in place. It was chaired by First Minister John Swinney and attended by the Deputy First Minister and Cabinet Secretaries for Health, Transport, Finance and Local Government, Rural Affairs and Islands, and Net Zero and Energy. They were joined by representatives from the Met Office, Police Scotland, Transport Scotland, SEPA, Transport and Utilities companies, as well as Resilience Partners. Well, that's all I've got time for this evening. But before I go, I just want to remind you that at Broadcasting Scotland, we depend on the generosity of our supporters. So to everybody who has donated and everybody who has signed up to make a regular monthly payment, thanks very much. We raised £20,000 from April to the end of 2024, 16,000 short of our target of 36,000. We had to borrow 12,000 to enable us to pay our bills and survive, but the pressure is still on, and we need to find enough regular donors to give us financial security. We face costs of more than £4,000 every month, but only receive donations of around 2,500. We need more regular subscribers, but we need to clear our debt as well. Our programs will always be free to view. However, if you can afford just £5 a month, please consider becoming a Broadcasting Scotland supporter and please donate whatever you can afford. So, thank you, goodbye, and I'll see you next time.